Hello and welcome back to Chapter 6 Notes. And so in this lecture video, we'll talk about some issues or challenges with cost allocation and do a few more problems as well, okay? So the first one is one problem or issue with cost allocation is that we could have allocations of costs that would not be controllable. So remember what we talked about back in the beginning of the course back in Chapter 1 is that we only want to hold managers accountable for those costs that are in their control. But if you're pushing down some costs to their budget and holding them accountable for any kind of cost allocations that are outside their control, that's really not very fair. And so what you want to make sure of is you have a good responsibility accounting system to trace the costs and revenues to the appropriate divisions. Okay? Or just don't use those cost allocations in evaluating a manager's performance. The other one is that we can have arbitrary cost allocations. I mean, as we saw with that Taylor Bath example, you could have a couple different allocation bases that could be equally justifiable. So choosing one allocation base can distort and change the cost allocations, and so it's going to be a little bit subjective there. That could be a challenge. The other thing that you have is the idea of unitized fixed costs. So fixed costs are said to be unitized when they're stated on a per unit basis. So what that means is if I came over here, I'm going to look back at this liars, tutors, and fools problem. So if I came over here and I put these two, 850, the total costs, and I divided that by my 400,000 minutes, and then I got my rate, right? In this case, we just took our variable cost divided by the minutes. In this case, what I'm doing is I'm going to include the fixed costs and the variable costs, okay? And then allocate that out using this rate. So in that case, right, this is going to be a bigger dollar amount, right? It's going to be a bigger dollar amount. I'm going to multiply it times 190, and of course, they'll get a slightly different answer right there about how much cost they get. Now, what this says, the problem with this is that the manager of the criminal law division is going to see these costs that he or she gets as a variable cost. The more computer time I use, the more cost I get. But the problem is that's a fixed cost for the company. So it's a fixed cost for the company. But because of the way that the manager of the criminal law division would receive the cost in terms of number of computer minutes, then it looks variable. And so there's a perception mismatch when you unitize fixed costs. And what I mean by that is I'm putting them on a unit level. In this case, I'm saying, well, what's the total cost for each minute of computer time? It's okay to do that with variable costs, but with including the fixed costs up here causes the problem because of that perception mismatch. The manager of the criminal law division looks like it's variable to them, but it's really a fixed cost at the company level. Okay. So a better way to do that would be to use a lump sum allocation. So that's like back in that liars, tutors, and fools problem. We said, all right, we're going to allocate out the fixed costs using fixed percentages rather than putting them on the unit basis of computer minutes and allocating them out. Now the problem, why is this a problem? Why is this even an issue? Well, you might actually have a manager who may not want to take on a special project because they're going to get more costs allocated to them. So for example, suppose the carpentry division is thinking about making a new hammer that sells for $20. At this price, the division expects to sell 100,000 units. Production of the hammer requires $12 in materials, $6 of labor, and an increase in manufacturing overhead of $130. Suppose that G&A costs, which would be our fixed costs, right, as we're saying, are allocated at 4 cents per sales dollar. So we have our total sales right over here. And it says the manager of the carpentry division may not want to make this new hammer because it could result in a loss. So you see over here, we have an incremental profit. And what we're assuming, let's assume that these G&A costs are fixed. These are fixed at the organizational level, but they're pushed down to each division at 4 cents per sales dollar. So what they've done, right, they have more sales dollars, so which means that they have more G&A costs pushed down to them, and after that G&A cost is pushed down to them, it looks unprofitable. And if you hold the manager accountable at this level, they may not want to do it, but you can really see we actually do have an incremental profit. So it would actually make sense from the company's standpoint to take this, because regardless of whether they do this new hammer or not, we still can receive, the company still has $2 million in fixed G&A costs. So whether or not they do the new hammer or not, they still have $2 million in G&A costs. So at the company level, this doesn't matter. And when you push it down to the division, and you said, this is what we're going to hold you accountable for, they say, well, we don't want to do it. But really, for the company, it's a good idea. Okay? So that's why the unitized fixed cost can become a problem, and that's why a lump sum allocation of this, based on certain percentages, would be a better way to do this. Okay? The other problem that we can have, some other problems that we can have, is we can have too few cost pools. If we only have one or a few cost pools, that can distort the cost allocation. It'll be less accurate. Okay? But we do have to consider the benefits of using more cost pools. You can use more cost pools, but that will result in greater complexity, although it will be more accurate. And then the other problem is only using volume-related allocation basis. There are some costs that do not vary with volume, such as setups, cost of setting up equipment. If I have to set up the equipment to make product A, and I have to set up the same equipment to make 1 unit of product A as I would for 100 units of product A, that setup cost does not vary with the number of units. It would vary with respect to the number of setups. And so if you use a volume-related allocation basis, such as direct labor hours, that can distort the cost allocation. Okay? Finally, let's look at these quick check problems. The direct method of allocating cost allocates service to other service. No. Allocates, it's indirect cost. And then what we could say is allocate service department costs to production departments only. Okay? We say over here, the next one, when fixed costs are stated on a unit basis, they are said to be unitized. That's true. And fixed costs may appear to be variable to the managers receiving the allocations. Decision making is not greatly improved. D is the right answer. Okay? So let's jump ahead and look at this problem with one of my many companies. Henderson Company allocates costs from the payroll to maintenance and to molding, finishing, and packaging. Our payroll department costs are based on the number of employees in the department, and the maintenance department are based on the square footage. Okay? So use the direct method. So what that means, right, is that payroll and maintenance are going to go down here. Okay? So what might be a good idea is that you pause the lecture video, give these problems a try on pages 17 and 18 of your chapter 6 notes, and then come back and check to see how you did. Okay? I'm going to go over it. So what amount of the payroll cost will be allocated to molding? So the first thing I'm going to do is calculate my rate, my 120,000, and I'm going to divide that by my total basis, which is going to be payroll is based upon the number of employees in the departments. And how many employees do I have in these departments, in each production department? So I have my 150. 75 plus the 25 plus the 50 is 150. So that equals is $800 per employee to be allocated. And I come over here, it says we'll go to molding. So how many employees are in molding? 75 times the 800, okay, which is going to give us the 60,000. Right? That's how much would go to molding. Number 2, in the payroll department, what is the amount that will be charged to employee? I just did that. That's 800. That's just right up here. Okay. What amount of the payroll will be allocated to the packaging department? So I just look at the 25 times the 800, which equals our 20,000. Okay. And then when the maintenance department costs are allocated, okay, when the maintenance department costs are allocated, what amount will be charged to the packaging department? So I have to look back at my packaging, and it says packaging, I'm sorry, let me look back at maintenance. So it says maintenance are based on the number of square footage. Okay, so I'm going to take my once, so it's probably 200,000 of square footage. Okay, So I take my total cost of $320. That's the total cost of the maintenance department, divided by the total square footage of my producing departments, which is 200, which gives me $1.60 per square foot. Okay? That's the first thing I have to do, calculate the rate. And the second thing is how much goes through the packaging. We'll look back over at packaging. The packaging gets 40,000, has 40,000 square feet. So I come over here and I want 1.6 times the 40,000, 64,000. And then now that I've got my rate, how much would be charged to molding? I look over here and I have 100,000 square footage. So that means I'm going to have 160,000. Okay, 1.6 times the 100,000. Okay. All right, that concludes this lecture video talking about cost allocations. The next lecture videos, the rest of the lecture videos on Chapter 6 will be covering activity-based costing and some on activity-based pricing. Okay, thank you.